listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
So when was the last time your family did a fire drill? Only half of American families have practiced a home fire drill, but 9 in 10 structure fires happen in the home. Add that to the fact that most parents believe they have 5 minutes to get out in a home fire. No, your family has less than 2 minutes to exit your home to safety. 2 minutes isn't much time. So here's the deal. Go to homefiredrillday.com. You'll find a fire escape plan tool for families, a smoke alarm checklist, home fire drill games, and more. Remember, it's homefiredrillday.com. You can also download the Make Safe Happen app, where you can find super helpful tips to keep your family safe, including room by room and age by age tips. It even includes a 2-minute timer for practicing your home fire drill. So get to it. This friendly reminder is brought to you by Nationwide's Make Safe Happen program. Today we're talking to Debbie Reber, parenting activist, New York Times bestselling author, and might I also add, the author of more than 18 published books. She's also the founder of Tilt Parenting, a website, top podcast, and social media community for parents who are raising differently wired children. She's also had a past in TV and worked on shows like Blue's Clues and even developed shows for the Cartoon Network. But today we'll be talking about her latest book, Differently Wired, Raising an Exceptional Child in a Conventional World. So welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm happy to be here.
I feel like I need some sound effects in the background that are muffled cheers and screams when I say that part.
To work on that.
No, I got to work on my special effects. But we have such smart people on this podcast. I'm so excited that we've got you here today. Before we jump into your brilliance, though, it sounds like you're currently living in the Netherlands, right?
I am. We just passed our 5-year anniversary here.
Oh my gosh. Talk to me about that place. It's on my bucket list. What took you to the Netherlands?
I'm so glad to hear it's on your bucket list because I feel like people don't really know that this has to be on their list when they're coming to Europe. We ended up moving here because of an opportunity through my husband's job. And I had never been to Amsterdam before. I came here sight unseen. We sold our house in Seattle and just went for it. And it is the most charming, magical city. You know, I've traveled all over Europe in the 5 years we've lived here, and I'm always so happy to come back here. It's got kind of the energy and bustle of a very vibrant, lively, energetic city, but it also feels like a village. It's so livable and beautiful and charming. So I can't say enough about it. I love it here.
So if you're new to the Netherlands, top 3 things you should do or see or eat. I don't know. Just tell me your 3 favorite things that someone should not miss when they visit.
Well, you have to have a Stroopwafel, which, I think they're starting to sell them in stores around the world, but you need a homemade Stroopwafel, which is basically...
Okay, so spell Stroop, though, because I went to Stripwafel, and maybe it's just because I was thinking of the red light district.
Very different thing. So it's actually called a Stroopwafel, and it's Stroopwafel. And it's 2 very, very thin homemade kind of wafers, almost like a homemade ice cream cone waffle that are smeared in the middle with stroop, which is like a caramel syrup kind of warm goo. And it's amazing. So that would be number 1. Number 2 would be to rent bikes and explore the city because there are more bikes than people in this city. And that's really the Dutch thing to do, is to bike around and ring your bell at people who inadvertently walk in the bike path because they think it's a sidewalk. And then the third thing I would say is, there are so many canals, that almost as many as Venice. And so to take a canal boat ride, it's a really amazing way to see the city. And it's just stunningly beautiful when you're on the water.
Oh, dude, you laid down some perfect little tidbits. And I ambushed you with that question.
I know.
I also picture the Netherlands to be a land of windmills. Is it also, or is that just Denmark? I don't know. Talk to me.
There are a ton of sheep and a ton of windmills. And yeah, as soon as you get, and it's very flat, as soon as you get outside the city, you'll just find fields. It looks like a storybook. You'll just find fields with these really cute sheep and these, the trees were all planted perfectly spaced apart. And then a beautiful old windmill. Like they're everywhere. It's really like a picture book.
I'm all in. Okay, so tell me, where did you grow up? You're originally from the US, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is about 45 minutes northwest of Philadelphia. And I was there till I went to university.
Yeah, and I sent you a link to the movie clip that we ask everybody about.
Yeah.
So we're going to ask you, what is your childhood ratatouille in Reading, Pennsylvania? So the smell, the taste, the sight that takes you back to that place.
I will say it's actually at the Jersey Shore. Is that okay? Because I spent
I'll allow it.
Okay, thank you. I spent my summers at Ocean City, New Jersey, and it's definitely Johnson's caramel corn, which is something you get on the boardwalk there. My mom still sends me tubs of it sometimes if they get down there over the summer, but it's just, it's warm, fresh, gooey, sugary goodness.
See, you've mentioned caramel twice now.
Yeah, there's a theme.
I'm going to have a situation today where I break down with a whole bunch of caramel.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. It just sounds absolutely delicious, as I have been nursing my go-go squeeze this morning because I didn't have time to make a really good breakfast. All right. So if you were to guess, what do you think your son's ratatouille would be tied to the Netherlands or for your family? Would it be, those Stroopwafels, or what's the thing that you smell that in the Netherlands where you say, all right, I'm home, I'm back here?
I think it would be the Stroopwafels because it was really through him that we discovered the best ones, which are at a little stand by Museumplein, where all the Van Gogh Museum and the Rijksmuseum are. That would definitely be it for him. It's something he will desperately miss, I'm sure, when we leave this place.
Okay, I'm going to go to that exact place and get those waffles.
Okay. I'll draw you a map. You'll know exactly where to go.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, let's dive in. You have a book called Differently Wired, Raising an Exceptional Child in a Conventional World. Define the term differently wired for us.
I use that term to describe kids who are in some way neurologically atypical. So that can look so many different ways. Some of the things that I include in the book and talk about in my podcast are things like ADHD, sensory processing issues, learning differences like dyslexia or dysgraphia, could be on the autism spectrum, anxiety disorders, kids who are gifted. So it's really a very inclusive term. And there are so many ways to be differently wired, but I wanted to have a term that felt positive and optimistic, but also recognize that there's more than one way to experience the world and to learn.
Yeah. A really positive term to put an umbrella over it, because even just as you started to talk about it, there are so many different ways. And I don't know whether to call them diagnoses or what they are, but if we look around, it's like every kid has something about them that makes them unique or something different that's a challenge for them or whatever it is, that I don't know that we can really easily label kids these days. So I think if we can just say we're all differently wired, great.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of parents who kind of self-select into this community because, just as you said, there's some aspect of their life, and it could just be, being really sensitive to energy or around you or loud noises, or, it could be having a processing speed issue. So you have some lagging skills, but some aspect that makes day-to-day life or just moving along in the school system in a way that's considered normal, it makes that more challenging. And I think there are so many challenges for kids to we're always trying to squeeze them in, right? Here's the structure of school. And if you don't fit into that in this exact way, then that's going to be difficult in some way.
Yeah. Well, and even I'm looking right now, my sister just had a baby and she's 38 and it's blowing her mind. At this point, she's super educated, right? She's read everything you can read. She's tried to do everything, avoid every nitrate, all the things. But then no matter what you do, no matter what you avoid or how much salmon you eat, you still get a kid that is just its own little person. Mm-hmm. All that stuff you read, you still have to take a look and be like, okay, I've got this little package that is very much unique and its own little person. So how do I just address that as opposed to being under that constant pressure of doing everything by the book. And there's way too many books, right, about exactly how you should do things.
It's so true. And I love that you said that, because one of the things I say a lot is that when you're raising a kid who is differently wired in a more extreme way, we parents are forced to really examine, these preconceived notions we had about what our kid was going to be like, what our life as a mom was going to be like, and what their future would look like. And when you have a child who doesn't have one of these more classic neurodifferences, they're still not the kid you expected, usually. And I think it's harder if you're raising a kid who is kind of able to fit in. It's harder to step outside and have that separation and say, wow, yeah, I need to adapt to who you are as an individual. I need to let go of all these ideas I had going into this.
Now, tell me about your son, because he's a big part of this journey for you, right?
He is. He's the inspiration for everything that I, have created through Tilt and for this book. So I have a 14-year-old son who is twice exceptional, and that term refers to kids who are gifted and they have some kind of secondary or multiple learning disabilities or other diagnoses. And so he's gifted, he has ADHD, and he's a complicated, fascinating kid. So going through the journey with him and having to get really creative about how to support him and help him thrive is what inspired me to support other parents in this journey, because it can be a lonely journey when you realize you're going down a different path.
Well, so I read a little bit in your Tilt Manifesto, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, and I'm just going to read this piece back to you, and then I want to get your feedback on it. But actually, before I do that, let me set the stage for listeners. You've moved to the Netherlands. It's the first 6 months, and you're adjusting to Dutch culture, the language, and figuring out this little boy of yours. So here's what you said. The most important thing I learned in those first few months, besides how to cycle through a bustling city with a 50-pound kid on the back of my bike, was that my biggest source of conflict was my relationship with myself. More specifically, my thinking about what my life as a mom should look like. Talk to me about that. What did you feel like your life as a mom should have looked like at that point?
I think I thought I was just supposed to rock it. I'm a really competent person. I have been successful in all of my work endeavors, and I'm used to doing well. I'm used to having control. I'm used to figuring things out and just kind of kicking butt generally. And so we very consciously brought him into the world. We were ready. I was 35. I was like, okay, we've got the books. And I just thought I was going to be this Zen mama, who was just had this perfect relationship and was on the right school board or whatever. I don't know. I didn't want to be like super mom. I wanted to be cool mom. I wanted to be cool working mom, got it figured out, make it, whatever. And instead, I had a child who reminded me every day that I was, in fact, had no control over anything that was happening. And because of my ridiculous expectations, I felt like a failure constantly. I felt judged by so many people, by educators, by other parents. And all of that was so personally hard for me, because I'm like, no, wait, this isn't who I am. I'm actually really good at stuff. This isn't because of something I'm doing wrong. So I had to really reconcile with who I wanted to be, or who this outside image I was trying to project, and actually what was happening in our family.
Well, and I have to toss out really quick. There's this quote that always plays in my head, and I'll figure out who said this and put it in the show notes. But expectations are the root of all frustrations.
Yeah.
I mean, we live our lives with a certain set of expectations, and you said a word that just like hit me in all bold, right? Which was instead. Here's what I thought it would look like. Here's who I thought we'd be and what would happen. And instead, and the instead doesn't always lead to a really horrible thing. It's just instead, here's what we got, and it looks different. And sometimes we struggle to pivot to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is in that place of stuckness that all the pain happens. It's pain, parents who are in that space, the pain is all stemming from their inability to pivot, as you said, I love that word, and to kind of look at reality. Like, this is actually what's happening right now. I can say all the shoulds or, things that I want to, the way that this should look, but it doesn't. So you have a choice to make. You can either get with the program and accept what's happening, or you can continue to struggle.
Yeah, exactly. How then at this point has your view of motherhood changed? What does your life as a mom look like, or what do you feel like it should look like having pivoted?
I love my life. I just, sometimes I even feel embarrassed to say how much I love my life as a mom. When I started homeschooling now 6 years ago, and I never thought I would have survived it. And now, not that every day is, lollipops and roses, but I feel really honored that I get to do this, and really just grateful to spend the time I spend with my son, who's going to leave. He's going to go on to college and do his own thing. And to have the opportunity, it really is an honor to walk through life with a child and just really surrender to the journey and to the messiness of it, and to doing all the work and screwing up and trying to do better the next time. All of it. It's forced me to be super present. And for that, I am so incredibly grateful, because I feel like it's made my life feel so much richer.
And remind me, how old is your son right now?
He turned 14 in the summer.
It's this stage of life. I probably lament about it too much to all our listeners, past episodes. I've got a 14 and a 16-year-old. I think part of really soaking things in right now too is this pace that kind of hits as our kids get older, at least for me, that is really forcing me to be very present, because I really am looking at every moment in ways that I don't think I did when they were little, because that stretch of time felt really long. And this stretch of time feels short, where I'm just like, dude, I got to soak this in. And really, I do love it. Even the mistakes and the, tricky things that we're doing. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like the pace is picking up for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it was this summer, I remember thinking, gosh, it's been 5 years since we moved here. And in that, which felt like it's gone by in the snap of a finger. And many times I wanted it to go by more quickly, because it was pretty challenging in those first few years. Yeah. But now I'm like, in that same period of time, he's going to be gone. And I'm like, so yes, definitely. I'm holding on to all of it as tightly as I can, while still giving him room to grow.
Trying to be like, fly little bird, but then you're like, oh wait, come back and hug me for 5 more minutes.
Exactly.
So what does motherhood look like in the Netherlands? How is that different from our American lens on parenting? Are you finding that that's influencing your parenting at all, or any of your perspective?
It's different. I will admit that I don't have a lot of Dutch friends who are mothers, but I'm surrounded by the Dutch culture, and so I observe it a lot. The parents here and the moms are very they really want their kids to be very autonomous and independent. So you see kids, quite young, 8, 9, biking to school by themselves. There's very much of a let kids figure it out. Kids are given a lot of room to make mistakes, to figure things out, to stretch, to possibly injure themselves. Like the playgrounds here, you'd have to sign 10 waivers for them to exist in the US. And so it has a much more relaxed feeling to it. I think the moms here are awesome. You'll see a mom on a bike with like 4 kids. She's got 2 kids in the front, 1, 2 in the back, or maybe even having a Bjorn. Like, it's insane what these women do. They're like superhuman.
I was so afraid to balance a bike with just the little seat on the back with a kid on it, because I was just like, oh my gosh, my center of gravity is off. We're going down. I was really bad at those logistics.
Yeah, it's scary. It is scary, but it's a very, I don't know. It's pretty cool. I admire the Dutch moms that I see. I think they work hard. There are many playgrounds that are attached to little cafes so they can have their glass of wine while their kids are playing. Like, it's a very nice, more relaxed culture for sure in the parenting space.
One of the things I worry about in our American lens on parenting, especially in this age of Instagram, celebrity, and influencer, and really in this space of moms, is I feel like I see so many, moms with influencers with a platform where maybe they've got 1 million plus followers, right? And we're making this lens on motherhood look very styled and fashion focused, and these perfectly edited pictures, where I think a lot of moms are probably sitting at home and saying, oh man, like, that's not what this looks like. Not only from a clothes and logistics perspective, but then you back that into, and wait, like, I've got a different set of, challenges or circumstances with my kids and family. And it definitely doesn't look like that. And we're kind of constantly scrolling through that stuff that feels unrealistic to me. Do moms in the Netherlands, are they hanging out on Instagram as much? Is there that kind of impact kind of happening or cascading through what they feel motherhood should look like and work like?
I don't know that I'm super qualified to answer that question, but there doesn't seem to be as much attention paid to those kinds of things in general. There's a really interesting quality of life here where a lot of moms work maybe half-time or three-quarters time. That's really popular here. And that's something that businesses are very open to doing. So there is this sense that you can have your career and then you can have time to have coffee with a girlfriend and then you can pick up the kids. The kids are in kinder care from a pretty young age and in school, mandatory school by the age of 4. And so they just kind of balance it all. But there doesn't seem to be this prioritization, at least not in the communities, the circles that I run in. It's more kind of really enjoying your life for what it is.
I think we could do a lot better of a job of that over here in the States.
Yes, stateside, yes.
Now, as parents, though, what do we need to understand about each other in this whole journey when you know that maybe you've got friends or other parents at your school who are learning how to pivot and to adjust to a new set of circumstances or to, a kid who's got different abilities? What did you want other people to know about you and your family as you were moving through those initial stages and the complexity of it all?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things. That would be a whole other book. But I will say that one of the things that I struggled with, there's a couple pieces. One of the things I really struggled with was feeling like well-meaning friends and peers didn't know how to support me. Oftentimes I felt as if when I would share something that was really difficult, it would be downplayed because I think they were trying to normalize what I was going through. Like, oh, well, you should hear about the tantrum my kid threw. And I'm like, no, yeah, but your kid didn't get kicked out of a school. Like your kid's nanny didn't quit. So I really struggled to find people who would give me just like true empathy or just hold a space for me to feel what I was feeling and feel heard. And I think that's something we could all do better for each other, right? Is to just really honor and respect what people are going through when things are really hard and not trying to solve it or downplay it, but just be in that place with them. That would be one thing. And then, I think the thing that's still hard for me is that judging piece. And I think we all are kind of wired to compare and to judge. I do it. I'm not immune from this either, but it can be really hard when your child is the one who is, causing a problem in the classroom or at song circle or whatever it is, and feel that other parents are judging you as a parent or don't want to get to know your child as for how amazing they are and instead is going to label them as the bad kid or the trouble kid or whatever. That understanding piece and compassion, and instead of judging, thinking about how can we actually include and support. Because I will tell you, kids who are disruptive and have behavioral problems in school, they're doing it because they can't do any better right now. It's not a choice. It's not bad parenting. No kid wants to be that kid. It's because of lagging skills. And so we need a lot more compassion as a whole towards those kids and their families.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
We're committed to making you practice your home fire drill. So we've made a little video over on todaysmama.com where we run our kids through the paces. Step 1, check your smoke alarms. Step 2, know where to go. Step 3, practice the fire drill. And we've also added our own little step 4, which is to try to execute the perfect slow motion high five upon completion of your fire drill. You can check out our video and our group High Five Perfection on todaysmama.com by clicking on the link in the show notes, which as always you can find at todaysmama.com/podcast. This is episode 15. We'll see you over there. High five.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
What would you say to the parents who are afraid of saying the wrong thing? Because I have to be honest, I think we're in a world where words matter, vocabulary matters, whether it's about, circumstances with our kids or race or whatever it is. I think we're tripping all over ourselves when we talk to each other. And sometimes I would just want to be like, okay, I'm going to screw this up. Like, here's my question. I probably said it wrong, but like, talk to me. I don't know. Like, what advice do you have for those parents who find themselves tripping over, I just don't know what to say, or I'm screwing it up when they're trying to support somebody else?
I think it's just a matter of asking, what do you need from me? Or just know that I'm here. I don't know how I can help you right now, but if there's something I can do for you, let me know. I'm here for you, and whatever kind of support that could be. And I think, I like what you just said, and I couldn't agree more. There are so many important conversations we need to have that people aren't having because they feel uncomfortable. And I say, go for it. Go for that discomfort, and when you lead with that, like, I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I may screw this up. I want to be sensitive to what you're experiencing, and I don't know how to do that. That right there creates a sense of intimacy and vulnerability that can really go a long way in fostering deeper connection. So that honesty piece and just being authentic about it and the intention behind it, I think, is the best thing.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking somebody, how can I best support you? Like you were saying, like, how can I be there for you? Educate me about your situation, or what I can change, or whatever those things are. I think you can totally go into it like that. We don't have to pretend like we know all the answers or that we're going to say the right things, but I think we can honestly ask good questions and continue to be inquisitive and curious about everybody around us in the most helpful way possible.
Exactly. And assume the best, assume the best for who these kids are. I think that was something that I really struggled with when Ash was younger, and he was really intense and he could be challenging, and so it was really hard with play dates and things like that. And I always felt kind of stuck. I wanted him to have play dates. I could tell some parents weren't up for it and some were. And I think just, again, having that deeper sense of understanding, looking at a child for who they are and not thinking about them just as their behavior is really important.
So the difference between your son when he was at that age where you're like, hey, like, can we have a play date? It's kind of out of control. And you're probably projecting into the future of, oh my gosh, at least here's what I would do. And what I did with my child, my oldest. I was like, oh my gosh, he is such a rage monster. He's going to be roaming the streets with brass knuckles. Like he's going to be a menace to society. Like, I projected his emotional issues as like a 4-year-old into like the criminal justice system really quickly. Did you struggle with like having these projections about him and almost like that kind of dark cloud of where you thought those behaviors would go?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I think one of the things I really struggled with when he was younger is he wasn't displaying empathy. And as someone that's one of my values, is compassion and empathy, one of my highest values, and really caring about the plight of others. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to raise this person who's going to not care about anyone in his life. And what does that mean and look like? Of course, he was 4,
Yep.
He got there. He's an incredibly empathetic person. I definitely worried about all of those things, especially in the school situation as well. Will we ever find a fit? Will he ever launch? Will he ever, go to university? Will he ever have a meaningful friendship? Will he have a relationships? I don't know. I don't know the answer to all those questions, but I definitely would go to a dark place and do, that fear spiral of the unknowns. And I think this is something all parents do. It's not something that we have a license on for sure, but yeah, when there's so little,
totally,
it's really amazing to me how we can make something that happens when they're 4 or 5, determine their success as a adult.
So what would you say to those parents who are maybe 10 years behind you now, where you're like, hey, that's where my head was when he was 4, but he's 14 now. And what does that look like? I know we're never all the way on the other side of parenting, but what does that look like to have a teenage son and whatever work you've done in the last 10 years?
I would say to kind of let go of these preconceived timelines of when you think things are supposed to happen, because that's when we really get into trouble. If we're expecting that our child is going to, follow this traditional trajectory of maturity and development and social skills and executive functioning and all these pieces, we're just going to constantly set ourselves up for distress. And in my experience, and from so many people that I've talked to and parenting experts I've spoken with, if we can hold the space for them, be consistent, and do the work to accept who they are and try to support who they are, not with our own agenda, but who they actually are as a learner and a human in the world, they will get there. And it's going to happen in their own time. And we just need to be patient, consistent, and keep showing up.
So I love the term holding space for people. At first, when people would say, oh, like sometimes, people would just say, oh, I'm holding space for you right now. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, what does it even mean? Like holding space for me. But then when I think about it for kids, like I almost just think of like creating stretchier boundaries. Maybe boundaries may not be the right word, because, we obviously want to have boundaries with kids, but I'm picturing like the big, like umbrella parachute thing that the kids stretch out. I just imagine like pulling it a little wider. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the term holding space. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's just really, when I use it, I'm talking about seeing your child as an autonomous being in the world who is on their own journey. And so our job is to support them. Our job is to give them a place to feel secure, to give them a place to feel unconditional love, and to give them a family that they know has their back no matter what. So we're giving them that space to be who they are and feel really good about who they are, no matter what happens in the outside world or at school or with friends. Because if they have that sense of security at home, they are going to be able to thrive, and grow and develop in that kind of loving space. So that's how I use it.
I love that. That's beautiful. And really for me, always having your house, or at least striving to have your home be a place where you and your kids can exhale a little bit.
Absolutely. And that might mean, literally like making it super cozy, which is something we do. We have a lot of cozy throws in my house and good slippers. Like we really like the coziness, but it can also mean, if kids are struggling with school or with homework and stuff, like making sure that there's that separation of church and state, that you're just being there as a coach or a mentor, a supportive parent, and not picking up where school left off.
And that's got to be especially hard as a mom who homeschools.
Touche. Yes, it's it's a dance that we've been figuring out, but for some reason it works. I don't know how we've gotten there, but I do have two different personas. But I will say that as he's getting older, and I've actually just been reading this great book by William Stixrud named The Self-Driven Child, and it has really kind of blown my mind a little bit and helped me even create more separation in terms of my trying to control who he is as a learner, or like getting too wrapped up in his journey. Because as a teacher, I have been approaching it differently than as a parent. And I'm trying to create more separation there and just make it more of a supportive coaching role again, as opposed to this kind of authoritative or like, this is what we're going to do today kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a big job you've got.
Yes.
I think my biggest quest as a mom and in parenting is to raise emotionally intelligent kids who, like you say, have empathy. Mm-hmm. So what do kids need to understand about those differently wired kids in their classroom, in their neighborhood, who they're running into? What do we need to teach our kids in terms of how to process that, how to reach out to them, how to have empathy? That was a really long question, but I bet you've got an answer.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I really believe deeply that if we raise, especially when kids are younger in preschool, they notice difference, but they don't necessarily assign, good or bad to it. It just is like, oh, that's interesting. I noticed that, Joey gets up and runs around in circles all the time when everyone else is sitting quietly at their desk, So if we can start really young and just like, yeah, isn't that interesting? This is a kid who needs to move, and here's why. Like, I think kids can then become the best advocates and allies for their friends. I mean, every child is in a classroom with differently wired kids. They're going to eventually be working side by side with differently wired people. And so just the more we can foster an understanding that there are so many strengths with being differently wired, and there's just different ways to move through the world, and that difference is difference, and it's not bad. And I will say, I think this is where teachers really have to help with this culture change, because they really can set the tone for the classroom. They can set the tone for how differing behavior, external behavior is perceived and responded to. So yeah, I think differently wired kids are fascinating, sometimes really quirky, and have really interesting interests, and they can be incredible friends if kids are willing to look past some things that might seem a little different.
Definitely. And, for kids who, if you've got a kid who kind of pretty easily snaps into the school system or whatever it is, like, my fourth grader, I've had it pretty easy with her. And, she can just go with the flow. And she's had plenty of kids with different circumstances and differently wired kids in her class. And this year in particular, she's got a kid who, has outbursts quite a bit. But one of my favorite questions to ask when she talks about somebody who may be having a hard time in class or maybe had an outburst that day or whatever it is. And I say this because I think when our kids answer this question, they're thinking more maybe than we think they are about it. So I'll say, why do you think he does that? And it's not because she's never answered, oh, it's because he's bad, Oh, I think he's frustrated. I think his brain works different than mine. I think he has problems with his anger. I think she's overwhelmed because she's new. If you ask them questions about what they're thinking about it, it not only gives you an opportunity to kind of help them course correct, but I actually think kids as young as, 6, 7, 8, 9 can have some real insights into how they understand their peers and maybe what they're going through. And then you can move past that to the, why do you think he does that, to like, oh, hey, how are people treating him? How can you treat him? That might help that situation.
I love that. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think, and I love that your goal is to raise emotionally intelligent humans. I'm right there with you. And I think those conversations and those questions are so important, and doing them in public, or, we do them while watching television, or, I often will be out in public and we'll see something, or I'll notice someone maybe on the tram who's doing something, and I'll say, oh, did you notice what was going on with this person? And we'll discuss it. And and I have to do this with my own differently wired kid. He has some friends who are differently wired who can get on his nerves, because of the way that they're wired. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? Let's talk about that. And it's been really interesting to kind of flip it around and say some of the things that you might find frustrating, those are actually things that other kids might have at one point struggled with in relationship to you. So there's so many opportunities to keep building understanding. And I think it's just ongoing communication all the time about these things.
Which to me is the game of parenting across the board, whether we're talking about, we have so many things to talk about: sex, social media, empathy. I just think we have to be so emotionally intelligent. And this is a thread, I think, through our last few episodes, that as parents, we really have to be emotionally intelligent to take our kids through this kind of constant stream of conversations and life that's happening.
Yeah. And it's such a fun thing to do. I don't know about you, but I feel like not just the ways that I've been stretched personally as a parent, but I love exploring all this stuff. Like, it's really fun to revisit our own belief systems around all kinds of issues, and have those, as our kids get older, we can have more deeper philosophical conversations, and the world's a fascinating place. So if you can kind of set this precedent that this is what we do as a family, we talk about things, we discuss feelings, we share perspectives, that is such a nice way to communicate together and to continue all of our own learning.
I so agree with you. And the word fascinating, like I had, before you even said it, I wrote down on my notebook, like, it's been fascinating. The fact, these are the conversations that have been the most meaningful in parenting to me as time goes on, because not only are we talking about important things that we hope are going to go with them through their lives, but also I think our kids can kind of constantly amaze us about how they see the world, and they can teach us stuff. And anyway, I'm loving that about teenagers too, is just the depth of conversations we're able to have. It has put a whole new lens on motherhood that I don't think I was totally anticipating.
Totally agree. Some of our favorite, times now are when we go to dinner and we'll be out at a restaurant and we'll get into this deep philosophical or political discussion, and we'll get home and my husband will turn to me and say, "That was awesome."
Yes.
I'm like, I know, right? It's really fun.
I love it. Now, if you could change, this is a hard question. If you could change anything in the world, let's just pick actually one thing. If you could change one thing in the world that would make the biggest impact in creating a place where all our kids can thrive, what would that be?
Oh my goodness.
I know that was the meanest question I could ever ask, actually. We just went levels deep on that.
Yeah. So if I could change anything, I would completely overhaul the education system in a matter of years rather than centuries, because it's a pretty slow moving process. And to me, that is kind of our biggest crisis right now, is how do we meet the needs for all kids in education to kind of accommodate where we're going as a society. And there's so much resistance to that, bureaucratic and other systemic. So I would figure out how to make that happen pretty quickly.
Like that's the place we got to start is with schools.
Absolutely.
And, in our own families, obviously we can start with our kids and our families, but from a society perspective, I totally agree with you. So much can be done in our schools, and we can all be drivers in that. One thing that's a big deal right now in the world is anxiety. So it's plaguing our kids, and I think it's plaguing us as adults as well. And this is kind of pivoting because you have a different book called Chill: Stress Reducing Techniques for a More Balanced, Peaceful You. And as we talk about, creating homes where we exhale and creating emotionally intelligent kids and all of this, I think anxiety is one of those things that's just wearing on us. And so if you don't mind, I want to talk about Chill for just a second.
Sure.
Okay. So what are your favorite quick stress reducing hacks or tricks that you've learned? What is inside that book, Chill, that can help our kids and our families just exhale a little bit more?
One of the things I have in that book is kind of a DIY coaching, which I use all the time. It's basically cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's kind of really getting to know that inner critic or that lizard voice in our head who is telling us that we're screwing up, that we're not good enough, who's kind of underlying all of the anxiety that we're feeling. So that's something we do a lot of in my house, and I do personally, is kind of identify what those unhelpful beliefs or thoughts are and dispute them. And I think that can be really powerful if we start separating ourselves from kind of those voices that are telling us we're not good enough or we don't have enough time or whatever it is that's causing the anxiety. I'm also a big fan of kind of routines. I'm a yoga person. My son and I, for a number of years, were doing the Morning Miracle, the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Hey, I'm not. So tell us really fast what it is.
It's basically starting off your day with these 6 different things that can be really super fast, but it's journaling, reading, intention setting, which is huge, meditating, exercise, and visualization. And it's just we could do it in like 6-10 minutes, and we do it together. And that is a way where you're just really taking time for yourself to be intentional about what you want to create. But there's something about, even if you're meditating for a minute, there's something about doing that can set you off on having a better day. The breathing piece, the meditation, the quietness is so helpful when it comes to calming anxiety.
Okay, so adding the Morning Miracle to my morning routine. Before you said 6 to 10 minutes, I was just writing down, how long does all of that take?
Well, because I started doing it with Asher, it was only going to work if it was super, super short. So it can be as short as you need it to be, or it can be an hour, but I don't know many moms who have an hour in the morning to visualize and set intentions. But if you do, not a bad thing.
I would love one.
Yeah, exactly.
I did love for a minute. I took my 2 older kids on a press trip with me that we had, or a work trip to the Mediterranean. We were on a cruise with Royal Caribbean. And when we came home, there was that 8-hour difference, right? So all of a sudden the 3 of us were waking up at like 4 a.m, like, hey, what's going on? Like, we were ready to go. And those mornings were so amazing because they got up. We had to kill some time before school started. They were reading. They made amazing lunches and breakfasts. I was reading. I kind of was having a morning miracle, but then my time change caught up to me again and my morning miracle died.
Yeah, it's amazing though, when you're on holiday like that and you just feel like yourself in a whole new way. And I think if we can find ways to even incorporate the littlest piece of that into daily life, that can go a long way.
Yeah. And I love adjust it for you, make it 5 to 10 minutes, whatever works for you, and just take that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you've got the book, Chill, Stress Reducing Techniques for a More Balanced, Peaceful You. We've got Differently Wired, Raising an Exceptional Child in a Conventional World. You've got loads of other books. Where can people find those? All on Amazon? Are they in most bookstores? Where can people pick up these brilliant works of yours?
Well, Amazon is probably the easiest place. Some of my teen books, the teen nonfiction section in traditional bookstores isn't so big. So not a lot of self-help teen stuff in the bookstore. So online, and I have a website, debbiereber.com, where you can check out and read samples from all of my books. And I created a bunch of bonus material for them too. So all of that lives on that website.
Perfect. Tell us about your podcast because, you've got like 500,000 downloads, something crazy. It's taking off like wildfire.
Yeah, it's been so fun. I've been doing it for 2.5 years now. It's called Tilt Parenting. And I interview parenting experts, coaches, authors, thought leaders, other parents, my son, and we have conversations about issues that are relevant to parents who are raising neurologically atypical kids across the spectrum. And yeah, I just released episode, I think 127 this week. It is so fun. And it has been really incredible. I mean, doing a podcast, you just can create a real global community. And it's been so exciting to see this grow and to hear from people all over the world that they finally feel like they found a tribe and a place to belong. Because as we talked about earlier, you can feel really isolated when you're on this path.
Definitely. And I have to say about podcasting too, this has been the funnest thing I've done in ages. We're only on episode 13. You are like my sage, wise podcasting icon. But this has been, in a long time, this is the funnest thing I've done from a business perspective. I'm really enjoying it.
It's so cool. I mean, I love the world we live in today. I just think it's kind of like the Wild West. If you have ideas and content and a message, there's no limit. And it's so exciting to be able to just kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this and then do it.
Yeah, I'm going to do a thing. And then you go do the thing and you can put it on the internet.
It's awesome. Yes.
Okay. Now, what other social channels, if people are looking to follow you on any social channels, where should they look for you?
I'm on all the social channels, more active on some than others, but I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. They're all under @tiltparenting, and that's where I'm most active. I also have personal Instagram, which if you want to look at pictures of our travels and pictures of my teenager looking emo at a cafe or something, you can go to my personal Instagram feed, but pretty much @tiltparenting for all of the traditional outlets.
All right. I'm all in, especially if you promise to, on the old grams, post maybe some waffles that I can envy.
Yeah.
So,
okay. That sounds like a challenge.
Yes. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've got so much more reading to do now because of you. I'm going to need to work my way through the complete Debbie Reber library and schedule my visit to the Netherlands, and so we can dine together in the streets and maybe ride together on a bike. You never know.
That sounds lovely. Thank you so much for having me on the show. This was great.
Thank you. As always, you can get the show notes and features at today'smama.com/podcast. Remember to like, rate, subscribe, all the things, and we'll catch you next week.
You've been listening to the Today's Mama podcast with Rachel Hersher. To find out more, go to today'smama.com. That's today's, MAMA.com. Today's Mama, connecting moms and families with the best of today.